The first thing I noticed after dying was the smell of oranges. Not hospital chemicals, not blood, not burning wires. Oranges. Fresh ones. The kind my grandmother used to peel slowly at the kitchen table when I was a little girl. That memory reached me before anything else did, and for several seconds, I honestly believed I was dreaming. My name is Dr. Eleanor Vance. I was 72 years old when my heart stopped inside a research laboratory beneath St. Catherine Medical Institute. And according to official records, I remained clinically dead for 5 hours and 11 minutes. Before that night, I spent my entire life studying human consciousness. Not spiritually, scientifically. I was one of the leading neurochemical researchers involved in late-stage brain activity studies. My work focused on one question: what does the brain experience during death? For 30 years, I dismissed stories about near-death experiences, the tunnels, the lights, the floating sensations. I believed they were nothing more than chemical reactions from a dying brain, stress responses, electrical residue, hallucinations. That was my position during lectures, during interviews, during conferences. I once laughed at a man on live television for describing an out-of-body experience after surgery. I still remember his face, the embarrassment in his eyes. I regret that now, more than almost anything. The night I died, Boston was frozen under black ice and heavy winter fog. Most of the building had already emptied hours earlier. Only a few researchers remained underground with me. The laboratory lights were dimmed to night mode, soft blue, cold, quiet. I had been reviewing experimental brainwave recordings from terminal patients, thousands of pages, thousands of dying moments reduced to graphs and numbers. I remember rubbing my eyes around 1:17 a.m. I was exhausted. The coffee beside me had gone cold hours earlier. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from age. That happens when you spend your whole life pretending your body is not getting weaker. I stood up from my desk to print another report, and that's when the pressure started. Not sharp pain, pressure, heavy, deep, like someone slowly lowering concrete blocks onto my chest. I grabbed the edge of the workstation. At first, I honestly thought it was anxiety or fatigue. Then my left arm went numb. The room tilted slightly. The fluorescent lights above me stretched strangely, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe properly. I remember hearing my own voice whisper, "Oh no." It was such a small sentence, quiet, fragile, not the words of a scientist, just an old woman realizing something terrible was happening. I fell before I could reach the emergency phone. My shoulder struck the floor first, then my head. Somewhere nearby, a glass container shattered. After that, everything became distant. I could still hear the laboratory alarms activating, footsteps, people yelling my name, but the sounds no longer felt connected to me. It was like sinking underwater while life continued above the surface. Then came the silence, complete silence, not peaceful, not frightening, just empty. And suddenly, I was standing. That part still terrifies me, because it felt completely normal. I was standing beside the laboratory entrance, looking toward the floor. The emergency lights flashed red across the room. Researchers rushed past equipment stations. One woman was crying. Another was calling for cardiac support upstairs. And in the center of the floor, I saw my body. Old, still, broken looking. For a moment, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. I actually remember feeling irritated, confused. I thought maybe I had hit my head and become disoriented. But then one of the doctors ran directly through me. Not around me, through me. The sensation was impossible to explain. Cold, like wind moving through smoke. I stumbled backward instinctively, but my feet made no sound. That was the first moment real fear entered me. Not fear of pain, fear of understanding. I looked down at my hands. They looked younger somehow, smoother. Not physically young, but lighter, less tired. The arthritis pain that had lived in my fingers for years was gone. My back no longer hurt. Even my breathing felt unnecessary. And yet, I could still think clearly, too clearly. I watched the medical team surrounding my body. They shocked my chest once, then again, nothing. One doctor checked the monitor and slowly shook his head. I knew that expression. I had seen it on hundreds of faces throughout my career. The expression people make when science runs out of options. One of the younger researchers began crying openly beside the wall. Her name was Maya, 28 years old, brilliant girl. She used to bring me orange candies during late-night shifts because she knew I worked too much. That's when I realized why I smelled oranges earlier. Not from memory, from her. The candies had spilled from her pocket onto the laboratory floor beside my body. Even now, that detail haunts me, because it felt more real than death itself. Then something strange happened. The room began pulling away from me. Not physically, emotionally. Like invisible strings were quietly snapping one by one. The fear, the panic, the urgency. It all started fading, and another feeling slowly replaced it. Distance. I no longer felt fully connected to the people in the room. Not because I stopped caring, but because they suddenly felt very far away. Like memories already beginning to disappear. The flashing emergency lights softened. The sounds became slower, muffled. And somewhere behind me, I heard footsteps. Very soft, very slow. I turned immediately, but nobody was there. Only darkness beyond the laboratory hallway. A darkness that should not have existed, because that corridor normally led to storage rooms, bright storage rooms. Yet now, it stretched endlessly into blackness. And for reasons I still cannot explain, I knew something was waiting inside it. I should have been afraid of the darkness. That would have made sense, but strangely, I wasn't. At least, not at first. What I felt was curiosity, the same dangerous curiosity that had guided me my entire life. The scientist inside me was still alive somehow, even after my body was gone. I remember looking back one final time toward the laboratory. Doctors still moved around my body. Someone was preparing another injection, another machine, another attempt. But everything already felt distant, slower, almost unreal. Meanwhile, the darkness behind me felt sharper than reality itself, clearer, more alive. And those footsteps, I could still hear them, slow, patient, not approaching me, waiting for me. That frightened me more than anything, because it felt intentional, like something already knew I would come. I tried to speak. Who's there? But my voice sounded strange, not weak, not strong, just thought. The words never fully left my mouth. They simply existed around me. No answer came back, only silence. Then the hallway changed. The laboratory walls slowly faded away, not disappearing suddenly, more like dissolving into fog. The red emergency lights stretched into long, glowing lines before vanishing completely. And suddenly, I was no longer inside the institute. I was somewhere else entirely. At first, I thought I was standing outside during winter. Cold gray sky above me, snow beneath my feet, wind moving softly in the distance. But after several seconds, I realized something impossible. The snow had no temperature. I could see it, hear it crunch faintly beneath me, but I could not feel cold. The world around me looked unfinished somehow, like reality built from memory instead of matter. Then I saw the house. Small, white wooden walls, front porch slightly crooked, an old wind chime hanging near the door, and immediately, my chest tightened emotionally. Not physically, emotionally. Because I knew that house. My childhood home in Vermont, the house my family lost when I was 13, the house I had not seen in nearly 60 years. Every detail was perfect. The cracked mailbox, the uneven fence, even the little rust stain near the porch stairs. I slowly walked toward it, and with every step, something inside me became heavier. Not fear, recognition. Like forgotten parts of myself were waking up. The front door stood slightly open. Warm yellow light glowed inside. I remember stopping at the doorway, because suddenly, I heard laughter. My mother's laughter. Soft, gentle, alive. I froze completely. That was impossible. My mother had died from cancer in 1984. I attended her funeral myself. I held her hand while she took her final breath. And yet, there it was again, her voice, coming from inside the kitchen. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I had spent my entire life rejecting anything spiritual, anything beyond measurable science, and now my dead mother was inside a house that no longer existed. The human mind tries desperately to protect itself from impossible things, so I immediately searched for logic. Hallucination, residual memory, dying brain activity. But deep down, I already knew something terrifying. This felt more real than ordinary life. I slowly stepped inside. The warmth hit me first. Not physical warmth, emotional warmth. The kind you only feel during very old memories. Fresh bread, tea, orange peels, rain against distant windows. The kitchen looked exactly as it had during my childhood, and sitting beside the table was my mother. You would think seeing a dead parent again would feel beautiful immediately. It didn't. It felt shocking, wrong, almost unbearable, because she looked young. Not sick, not dying, young, maybe 35 years old. Her dark hair tied loosely behind her shoulders, soft green sweater, small reading glasses resting low on her nose. She looked up slowly from the table and smiled at me, not surprised, not emotional, as if she had simply been waiting. I remember whispering, "No." That single word carried my entire collapsing worldview inside it. She stood slowly, and for the first time since my death, I felt panic, real panic, because some part of me understood this moment would destroy everything I believed about reality. "I watched you die," I told her. My voice trembled. "I buried you." She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at me with this strange sadness in her eyes. Not sadness for herself, for me. Finally, she spoke softly. "You buried a body, Eleanor." Her voice sounded exactly the same. Every tiny detail, every pause, every breath. I stepped backward instinctively. "No," I whispered again. "This isn't real." She gave the smallest smile. "You spent your whole life trying to make the universe smaller so it would feel safer." That sentence hit me harder than death itself, because it was true. I had reduced existence into charts and chemicals because mystery frightened me, not because I truly understood life. I suddenly became angry, very angry. Scientists do that when reality breaks. We resist, fight, deny. "This is brain activity," I snapped, "a dying hallucination." "Maybe," she said gently. "Does calling it that make you less afraid?" I opened my mouth to respond, but stopped, because suddenly I realized something horrifying. I could no longer remember the laboratory clearly. The faces of the doctors were fading, the emergency room, the machines, even my own body. All of it was becoming blurry, like a dream dissolving after waking. Panic flooded through me. "No," I grabbed the kitchen chair tightly. "No, no, no." My mother walked toward me slowly. "You're holding on too hard," she whispered. "I don't want to forget," I said, and that was the truth. Not fear of death, fear of disappearing, fear that my life would dissolve into nothing. All those years, all that work, all my memories, gone. My mother touched my face gently, and suddenly I remembered something I had not thought about in over 50 years. A winter morning, I was 8 years old, sick with fever. She sat beside my bed peeling oranges while snow fell outside. I remembered the smell, the warmth, the safety, and instantly I began crying. Not politely, not quietly, deep, painful crying. The kind that comes from somewhere ancient inside the human soul. Because for the first time since childhood, I felt completely known, completely understood. No titles, no research papers, no reputation. Just Eleanor, tired, old, human. And then the room flickered. Just for a second, the kitchen lights dimmed strangely. My mother looked toward the hallway, and the expression on her face changed immediately. The warmth disappeared from her eyes. Now she looked worried, very worried. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from somewhere beyond the house. And suddenly, my mother whispered something that still chills me even now. "You shouldn't still be here." The moment she said it, the entire house changed. The warmth disappeared first. The smell of bread, the tea, the orange peels, gone. Like someone had opened an invisible window and let the soul drain out of the room. Then came the silence, heavy silence, not peaceful anymore, watching silence. I turned slowly toward the dark hallway near the living room. The footsteps had stopped, but somehow that felt worse, because now it sounded like something was standing still, listening, waiting. My mother grabbed my wrist gently, and for the first time since seeing her again, I felt fear in her touch. Real fear. "Eleanor," she whispered carefully, "you need to leave now." "Leave where?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the hallway again, almost like she didn't want whatever was there to hear us. Then the house flickered violently. The walls trembled. The lights dimmed hard enough to nearly disappear. And suddenly, the front windows no longer showed snow outside. Now there was only darkness. Endless darkness. No sky, no road, nothing. That's when I finally understood something terrible. This place was not truly my childhood home. It was built from me, from memory, from emotion, and something else had entered it. The scientist inside me tried desperately to stay logical, but logic was collapsing faster now. My thoughts felt unstable. Time no longer behaved normally. I could not tell whether minutes or hours were passing. My mother pulled me toward the kitchen doorway. "You are between things," she whispered. "What does that mean?" Again, she hesitated, almost as if language itself could not fully explain it. Then finally, "You have not fully left life." That sentence echoed strangely inside me. Not fully left life. I suddenly remembered the laboratory again, the emergency team, my body, defibrillators, hands pressing against my chest. And for one brief second, I heard distant voices, muffled, very far away. "She's not responding." Again, charged to 300. The sounds cut through reality like radio static. The house trembled harder. My mother closed her eyes painfully. "They're pulling you," she whispered. I stared at her. "You mean I'm alive?" "No," she said softly. The answer froze me instantly. Then she stepped closer. "But you are not gone either." Nothing in my scientific career prepared me for that sentence. Not alive, not gone, existing somewhere impossible between both. The footsteps started again, closer now, slow, dragging slightly across the floorboards beyond the hallway. I finally forced myself to look. At first, I saw nothing, only darkness, but then movement, very faint, like a shadow trying to become human, tall, unclear, almost shifting shape constantly. My entire body tightened instinctively, not because it looked evil, because it felt ancient, older than emotion, older than language. It didn't rush toward me, it didn't threaten me. It simply stood there, watching. And somehow, I knew it had been near me since the moment I died. I whispered, "What is that?" My mother answered quietly, "Not everything wants to be understood." That terrified me more than if she had called it evil, because her voice carried respect, not hatred, respect. The shadow moved slightly closer, and suddenly, the house around us began breaking apart. The wallpaper peeled away into darkness. The ceiling stretched upward unnaturally. The kitchen lights burst one by one. The world built from my memories was collapsing. I backed away in panic. "What's happening?" My mother looked at me with tears forming in her eyes now. "You're staying too long." The shadow took another step forward, and instantly, memories exploded around me. Not normal memories, all at once, like my entire life had shattered open. I saw myself at 24, rejecting my younger sister's phone call because I was busy working. I saw my husband sitting alone at dinner while I stayed overnight in the laboratory again. I saw my daughter crying silently after one of my missed birthdays. Hundreds of moments, tiny moments, moments I once considered unimportant. But here, they carried unbearable emotional weight. And the worst part, I didn't just remember my actions. I felt what other people felt, their loneliness, their disappointment, their love, their hurt. Every emotion reached me completely. Scientists love control, but there was no control here, only truth, pure truth, and it broke me apart. I collapsed onto the floor, crying harder than I ever had in life. "I tried," I whispered. "I worked for people. I tried to help." My mother knelt beside me gently. "I know. No, you don't understand." I could barely breathe through the crying. I wasted everything important. That was the hidden fear underneath my entire life. Not death, Failure. Failure as a mother. Failure as a wife. Failure as a human being. I spent decades studying consciousness while slowly disconnecting from the people who loved me most, because achievement felt safer than intimacy. The shadow remained near the hallway silently, watching everything. Then suddenly, it raised one arm slowly, and the entire world vanished. The house disappeared instantly. My mother disappeared. The memories disappeared. Everything gone. Now there was only darkness, infinite darkness. No floor beneath me, no sky above me. And for the first time since death, I truly felt alone. Not lonely, alone. The kind of isolation human language cannot fully describe. No body, no sound, no direction, nothing. I don't know how long I remained there. Time had stopped existing completely. At some point, I became aware of something horrifying. I could no longer remember my own face clearly. Then my age faded. Then parts of my career. Even language itself began slipping away slowly. Like identity was dissolving piece by piece. Panic exploded through me. I screamed, or tried to, but there was no voice there anymore, only thought. And in that endless darkness, one realization entered me with absolute certainty. Consciousness does not end peacefully. It lets go slowly, like drowning beneath invisible water. That was the most terrifying moment of my existence. Not pain, not darkness, the fear of becoming nobody. Then, far away, I saw a tiny light, small, warm, almost impossible to notice. At first, I thought it was another hallucination, but slowly, the light grew brighter. And inside that light, I heard a voice, very faint, a young woman crying, "Mama." My daughter, Claire. I hadn't heard her call me that in years. And suddenly, the darkness around me began pulling violently. At first, I thought the darkness was trying to keep me. That's honestly what it felt like invisible water pulling against my mind. Heavy, slow, endless. But the voice kept reaching me. Mama, crying, shaking, real. And every time I heard it, the tiny light grew stronger. I moved toward it instinctively, or maybe it pulled me. I still cannot fully explain that part. There was no walking, no body, no movement the way humans understand movement, only intention. And suddenly, memories started returning. My name, Claire, the laboratory, the hospital, life. I held on to those things desperately, because somewhere deep inside, I understood a terrifying truth. If I stopped remembering myself, I might never come back. The light became painfully bright, and then sound exploded around me. Machines, voices, running footsteps, someone shouting orders, cold air against my skin. Pain crashed into me so violently I thought I was dying again. My chest burned. My throat felt torn open. I tried to breathe and nearly choked. Then I heard someone scream, "She's back!" The world above me blurred in white hospital lights. Faces moved everywhere. Doctors, nurses, tears, chaos. And standing near the corner of the room was Claire, my daughter. 70% of her hair had gone gray since the last time I truly looked at her. That realization hurt more than the needles in my body, because suddenly I understood how much life I had missed while being busy becoming important. She covered her mouth with both hands and started sobbing uncontrollably. Mama. I had not heard that voice with love in many years, not because she stopped loving me, because I stopped making space for love. I tried to speak. Nothing came out except broken air. The doctors kept moving around me rapidly. One nurse looked genuinely terrified. Another kept repeating, "This isn't possible." Neither was I. 5 hours, no meaningful brain activity, no stable heartbeat, no oxygen long enough to explain survival normally. And yet, there I was, breathing, crying, alive again. But something inside me had changed permanently. Not emotionally at first, physically. The world felt too loud, too sharp, too heavy. Even light hurt differently. For weeks after waking, I barely spoke. The hospital ran endless tests on me. Scans, neurological exams, psychological evaluations. They searched desperately for damage, for explanations, for scientific comfort. I understood exactly what they were doing, because I had done the same thing to others for decades. One neurologist suggested fragmented dream states caused by trauma. Another blamed oxygen deprivation. A third implied my memories were constructed after resuscitation. I nodded politely during all of it, but deep down, I knew something they didn't. The experience had not felt like a dream. Dreams fade. This didn't. If anything, it became clearer over time, especially the emotions. That was the strangest part. Not the darkness, not my mother, not even the shadow. The emotions stayed alive inside me with terrifying clarity. I could still feel Claire's loneliness from all those missed birthdays. I could still feel my husband sitting silently at empty dinner tables years ago. I could still feel my own fear dissolving inside that endless void. And slowly, my entire understanding of human life began changing. 3 months after leaving the hospital, I resigned from the institute. People were shocked. I had spent 40 years there. My work defined me. But suddenly, none of it felt important in the same way anymore. Not because science became meaningless. I still believe science matters deeply, but I no longer believe science is large enough to explain everything. That realization humbled me. For the first time in my life, I became comfortable saying, "I don't know." Do you understand how terrifying that sentence is for someone like me? A scientist builds identity around certainty, around answers. But death stripped that arrogance away completely. Some nights, I still dream about the hallway, the footsteps, the shadow. And no, I never fully understood what it was. People always ask me that. Was it evil? An angel? Death itself? I honestly cannot answer. But I remember one thing clearly. It never harmed me, not once. It simply watched, almost like a witness. And strangely, that frightens me less now than it used to. Because after what I experienced, I no longer think the universe revolves around human understanding. There are things beyond us, things older than language, older than religion, older than fear. And maybe we are not meant to fully understand them, only pass through them. The biggest change happened quietly, one Sunday afternoon, almost a year after my death. Claire came to visit me. We sat together in the kitchen drinking tea while rain tapped softly against the windows. Simple moment, ordinary moment, the kind I once ignored constantly. At one point, she looked at me carefully and asked, "Are you afraid of dying now?" I thought about the darkness, the dissolving memories, my mother's face, the feeling of becoming nobody. And strangely, I smiled, because the answer was complicated. Yes, I told her honestly. I think part of being human will always fear crossing that door. Then I looked at her, really looked at her, not as interruption, not as obligation, as my daughter, as someone precious. And softly I added, "But I'm more afraid of not living before it happens." Claire started crying quietly after that, and so did I. Not from sadness, from understanding. Because death did not give me secret answers. It gave me something harder, perspective. Now, every morning, I peel an orange with my tea, slowly, carefully, the same way my mother used to. And every time that smell fills the room, part of me remembers the place between worlds, the place where silence breathed, the place where I disappeared, and somehow found myself again.